Hey everybody, it's been a while. Bridget Lynn Dolgoff, Conscious of Economics and Urban Farm Project. And, well, things have been super hectic for years. And so I've just really pulled back, I got out of radio and got rid of all my websites and, over the process. Took care of my old girl in her later years, which she so deserved. Jin was the most amazing dog, I know people say that, but seriously, she had a lot to teach me and in my life. Anyway, it's Christmas Day. Been doing a lot of solstice work this year. The play with light and dark and coming into the darker period and then thinking about the lighter end of it, but mostly, how to bridge it and how to pull it into balance and not be overly one side and the other. And so what I want to talk to you about is that in your astrology natal chart, there's an 8th house. And I've always been, perplexed at how this 8th house plays out. And it seems to me, for me, people who have the same sign that is in my 8th house, because it's a natal chart, right? So it's the day I was born. It's like a photograph. And so people that have a certain sign, including my mother, that are in my 8th house, have these very, abusive and destructive and sometimes violent triggers, towards me. And I realize, this particular sign has a tendency to be a liar. They have a tendency to withhold really important information that you may need to know. They traffic mental illness and quite a bit, when they are dealing with some of their, I guess, lower aspects. And this sign particularly deals with a lot of money. I mean, mostly the control of money. You'll find that a lot of the CPAs and accountants and people like that have this particular sign. And anyway, so, since COVID, which I do believe for me, because I was already like an anti-vaxxer and blah, blah, blah in private practice for, forever. That, the only thing that really affected me was kind of stopping me in my tracks. And it caused such a deep trigger of reevaluation. And I think it really, really hit my 8th house, and 8th house is kind of a weird place. It's death and rebirth. It's kind of like if we have a partnership in the 7th house, it's the 8th house is like if we take the partnership farther, like into sex and intimacy. So it's kind of like those deeper aspects of ourself and other people. It's also kind of where, the shadow work lies, but it also has kind of an interesting polarity, years of working with it and trying to get to the bottom of it. And why, am I constantly dealing with the layers and layers and layers of, the crazy nonsense, with my mother. I mean, she's been dead since I think 99. And every time I think, okay, I'm done, with that level, I'm done with that layer. But recently I've been working with really deep stuff. Really deep, patterns and behaviors that she had, that this particular sign has a tendency to have when they're kind of in their, I guess, I don't know, shadow self, I guess is maybe a word. Um, and that, like the behavior that I adopted growing up, from it. And that, thank God that I feel like at least I have some type of Sag energy that is devoted. There's just a part of me that is so devoted to truth at all costs, that I can't bend my integrity, and I cannot, um, work in deception. It just makes me like violently ill. I'm just, and when people are trying to, put the sun there, because always there's like this certain kind of pattern. And maybe you out there, I'm posting this video because I want you to think about this right now in this period of time. I'm also kind of working on the 12 Holy Nights, which is like work, left by Rudolf Steiner, and, coming the 12 days, and, starting with the darkest kind of day, Christmas Eve, and then each day working on, like different aspects of ourselves. So today is the day of basically those very deep, intimate kind of relationships, and with our shadow, and moving towards, our intention, like for the earth, and putting, the energies into that, because of, breaking free from the deep inner, I guess, trappings. So anyway, it's kind of interesting how you motor through reality, and there's always these moments. So COVID gave me an opportunity to like just stop in my tracks. I think it stopped everybody on some level. For many of us, developing, and evolving, it actually helped us to really assess, like what our beliefs are, who we think we are, breaking, the cycle and the pattern that we're in with working and building and ambition and money and all of these, other things. I'm not saying they're bad things, but I think that the deep reflection work, is really worth it. And it really makes you appreciate, those other things in your life. So I came to this really interesting conclusion. Last night I did like about 6 hours of research, and you're supposed to stay up really late on, Christmas Eve, because it's kind of like the end of the first day of the 12 Holy Nights, reflecting and all the stuff. So I was right on target. I was right in it. I was right in the midst. And just, watching other people and how they're evolving, and even people who think that they're kind of spiritual, and how they use that more kind of as their weapon. They have like kind of this self-righteous aspect to their conflict that they are projecting onto you, and then also trying to start, fights, because they need that fight, because if they're in a fight with you, they start a fight with you, then they're right? They win because they extracted, they got to release on you all of their hate and anger and rage that probably doesn't have anything to do with you. And at the same time, they got to hook you into it, which means steal your vital energy. So replace their darkness with your light. So that's kind of like the give and take with it. So yeah, so there's just been like, since last week, there's just been a lot of like crazy conflictive energy. So I've just really been kind of taking it all in. I mean, I did get kind of pushed over the edge yesterday, but then I steered it back on track, to focus in on my internal work, where I need to be. What is it that my goals are? My goals are to get back on track with, my work with plants, get back on track on getting nature and getting back into, doing my plant studies. And there's also some other plants that are further out deep in the desert that I've been wanting to work with for a long time, but because of their spiritual presence, they are, very powerful plants. They're, I would consider them in the native, indigenous plants. And some of these plants you have to be very careful with, and you have to really make sure that you are in good mental, emotional, physical, and spiritual place to be able to deal with their medicine sometimes, because they do trigger sometimes darker shadow aspects, because these are the things they're healing in you. They, you could say, oh, well, it's healing me from this, it's healing me from that, like a cold or a flu or tuberculosis or whatever else, but because there's that shadow, that darkness that lives in you that has conjured or pulled in these kinds of health problems, the plants out in nature that you may be able to come in contact to deal with them have to deal with that part of that shadow aspect of who you are first. And so you have to approach them like extremely carefully. So, because there's a bigger picture here. So anyway, I'm working on getting back on track with getting back into getting out in nature, doing my plant studies, getting, back into harvesting, wild plant medicines and working with them, and just working in general with the plants and being in a really open place that I can actually listen to them so that they can talk to me to help me to, while I'm learning about them, to alleviate, my symptoms, which the first symptom is a spirit symptom, right? It's the spirit that is sick, the spirit that can't move forward, the spirit that holds on, the spirit that can't, that wants to free itself, right? To evolve, grow, and expand into the physical universe or physical world and what those aspects look like. So I wanted to bring you kind of with the duality of, what the eighth house, what the death and rebirth, the intimacy of relationships, the shadow self. They also can call the eighth house like the resurrection house. The eighth house also has a lot to do with other people's money, investments, and other stuff. So, also, so I'm just kind of using this kind of as a metaphor, right? Like, so you have something to think about, not go dive down into your eighth house, but the languaging that comes out of the eighth house. And I think what a lot of people are dealing with right now, what they're confronted with, running at life and throwing yourself with everything you've got against the wall and nothing moves. And, what do you do now, right? Where are you at now? And so this is just kind of information that I hope can help. So the one thing about this is that, going into the deep levels of work and really looking at like all the other kinds of aspects and how the eighth house, I think because my mom's sign was in it, she was an underminer. She was operating in her, shadow most of her life because of whatever, trauma, conflict, whatever. And so my 8th house is kind of, rooted kind of in darkness and a lot of the patterns. And so on top of it is like the place where you have to meet the shadow and you have to deal with the shadow and you have to build a deeper, more intimate relationship with yourself. So when you have like this money stuff, it's like, what do I value? A second house is like, what do I value? Like, how would I spend money? What's the value of what I value? And it's the opposite of the 8th house, but they work together like a seesaw. So I was thinking a lot about like, I value not the occult, but like the supernatural, the underlying things, good underlying things of everything that exists, the trees and fascinated by how animals communicate with the, water, and how the trees, communicate with the water, and how they interact with light and insects, and how their roots are. And I mean, like, I am fascinated by seed pods. I mean, seeds are some of the most fascinating things, like how they grow on plants and how it forms, and then how the pod and the aspects of the seed and how they're developed for their journey, They attach on to things. They have propellers and they fly away. Sometimes the pods just fall onto the ground, and the pod, breaks open at a certain point in time, when the seeds would be ready to develop. And it's just, I can see why a lot of, work in Steiner, I mean, they have like eurythmia, which is like this spiritual kind of dance movement that actually activates, different types of energies and helps to balance and integrate, and it does like so much stuff. And they have these like wooden balls that they use in their hands as they're, dancing, but it's the seed, right? It's the seed. And I know that this sounds kind of pagany, and it's actually really not. I think that it's more kind of interwoven into like the angelic world. And if you study kind of the layers of the different kinds of beings in the angelic world, it would make perfect sense that you would want to get away from the languaging and Bible and all this information and actually do movement threads of certain types of movements to activate the right hemisphere to bring about the activation like of angelic realms, realms of the unseen. Because really that's all we really are here, is a vessel for, I don't know, divineness or information, antenna. I mean, all that stuff applies. Okay, so the most important part here is that what all this boils down to. So I'm going to be making a movement back into the natural world, and being, in it as much as possible, and getting back to my studies. Because all this other stuff, the nonsense for me doesn't matter. Like what I value is soil and seeds and plants, and studying them and interacting with them on a daily basis. I mean, that's what I value. I value the growth and understanding of, my place in this world, with how it relates to other things that are so much older than my body. And the respect, a lot of these trees are way older than me. They're, in my traditions would be, my grandmother's, right? So, I think that, the creator or God created the library, gave us the plants, to feed us and give us the medicines we need to do the spiritual work, the emotional work, the mental work, and, the physical work. And so for me, there's no more important work. And I get that everybody has a different value. Some people want a nice comfy couch to sit on every day. take a nap on. People want to drive like a really nice car or go to, a spa or whatever, they want to do. And I like some of those things too, but I feel deeply dead and without being in nature and dealing with the plants. And so part of me moving back towards the light is, or, integrating back into the light is to get back into what I need to do. So going through this big, not conflict resolution or anything else like that, but bringing it back home to myself. And then so the second house deals with what we value, and then into the eighth house, the seesaw. And the eighth house is about, the shadow work and dealing with all this stuff. And because of the certain sign that's in that house in my personal natal chart, and they're very, money oriented, it becomes like a more difficult house to navigate, especially from the value system that I value. And it's like it causes a lot of internal conflict in me. So this is what happened. This is like coming into this. Oh, I don't know if you can see that bird. Oh, it was so beautiful. Flying down the river. So this is what it all boiled down to, was possessions versus release. Do I walk the path of the eighth house, dealing with possessions and in the world of money? I'm not saying money's a problem. Or do I go back to the value system of the second house, or my value system and what I value, and release what doesn't work for me, what holds me in darkness, what holds me in the shadow, that I'm constantly in conflict with and fighting against and trying to prove myself to, just be able to stay afloat? Or do I release that, possessions versus release, and release that, and then just get back on the red road, get back on the path, and trust that doing what I value, doing what I think is significant, important for my soul work, will lead to being taken care of in whatever way that is at the time. So I give up the keys and the steering wheel to the creator, the universe, the good spirits, the forces, and then I take a back seat and just allow it to drive the mechanism that needs to happen while I am deeply embedded in my studies. So, yeah, I thought that was a really profound thing to come into this, moment where you see the duality and the polarity in something, and that it's possessions versus release. And that the only way out is to just let go and let it fall, and then march forward with your eyes open and your head up into being in what your value system is wholeheartedly. All right, so anyway, any of you guys out there struggling, I hope that this assists you in some way, and you can recover your soul's work, whatever that may be, and have faith. All right, everybody. Talk to you later. Bridget Lynn Dolgoff, Conscious of Economics and Urban Farm Project.